It is Saturday, the 22nd of the 11th, 2025. The time is 10 minutes past 8. And as always, that means one thing, that there are very many F1-centric threads, multitudinous F1-centric threads, at which we need, no must, pull. In the first instance, we'll talk about Maximilian Verstappen saying that he loves wet, but Las Vegas is too much as far as the extent to which that track has no grip. So too, we'll talk about a restructure around Maximilian Verstappen's team and engineers going into an all-important season for the Bulls that are red in 2026. We'll talk about Sir Lewis Hamilton, DC, coming out and saying that that was embarrassing from the 7-time champion Sir Lewis, Carl Davidson Hamilton. We'll talk about Lando Norris, breaking news that he's changed his team, sports psychiatrist, sports psychologist, mental health games. Talk about all the things that have yielded such fruit as far as Lando Norris is concerned. So too, we'll talk about Toto, the boy who cried wolf, and who on the grid of the 20 drivers he thinks is the most underrated. And in the final instance, as your main event, we've got to talk about Charles Leclerc, haven't we? That dude's gone. I think he's gone. Chat, I'll be honest with you. A lot of chat now about drivers' silly season, not least of which where Charles Leclerc ends up at the very latest in 2027 in the first instance. Let's talk about Max Verstappen, because he didn't sound too happy. He was a cheeky chappy all race weekend long until qualifying. Many had him, the odds makers included, as an odds-on favourite to drop it on pole, bearing in mind the fact that he's got a brand new power unit and Red Bull should go well around the cooler climbs and circuit circumstance that is Las Vegas. However, it was chaos. That RB21 turned into a dog again. Max Verstappen said it was good, but not good enough, that he didn't have the pace to put it on pole, that he was a gazillion miles away from Lando Norris in that MCL 3.9. And then you get in the post-qualifying presser, Maximilian Verstappen was asked a couple of questions. How was it out there? They always do it. Tom Clarkson always tries to drum up the Las Vegas Grand Prix, the spectacle. How was it out there? You've got to love Las Vegas. Viva Las Vegas, Elvis, etc., etc. At the altar, under the aegis of growth markets. And I get it, but bloody Nora, why don't you shove it down our necks some more, Tom Clarkson? Do you know what I mean? It feels a little bit contrived, no, forced at this stage. And Max Verstappen responded to it right. They asked him, where else would you like to go in the pre-race presser? And Max Verstappen said, you know what, the North Pole wouldn't be too bad. Tongue very firmly in cheek. Post-qualifying, he was asked about the conditions, and Max Verstappen said, I love the rain. Rain is my natural habitat as far as driving racing cars. But this, Max Verstappen said, this level of low grip, this level of Las Vegas Grand Prix circuit is too much, Max Verstappen said. He said he's surprised that there weren't more drivers yeeting it into the barrier. So low grip and treacherous were the circumstances. And I don't hate it from Max Verstappen. I think he's onto something. Yeah, it's brilliant. The F1, the commercial arm, have done so much things to institute for the infrastructure requisite to running a Grand Prix around Las Vegas. And again, it will do gangbusters things in the end. I know that ticket sales haven't been great this time around, but you've got to stay invested, right? That scared money make no money. But Max Verstappen's not keen. He just wants to get back to a Silverstone or a Spa-Franco shop. And herein lies the dichotomy and all the paradox for which we need to solve as an F1 community. How do you tick the boxes of the drive to survive generation, all the while keeping grizzled, grey-bearded F1 veterans engaged too? It's techie, that. I don't know. I don't know the answer. Maybe more Silverstones, maybe more Spa-Franco shops, maybe don't get rid of Zandvoort next year as an example. I don't know the answer to these questions, but Max Verstappen is none too pleased. Then let's fast forward to the race. Max Verstappen starting from second, and he has everything to gain, not much to lose really. Lando Norris starting from pole. So how do you fix for that, Lando? Short running down to turn one. I don't know what Lando's game is. He's got to nail the start, hasn't he, just like he did at Mexico, and go super defensive. Lest we forget, Maximilian Verstappen won't hesitate to put a wheel up the inside of a Lando Norris, just as he did Charles Leclerc in 2023. Oh, and by the way, chat, got to talk about Lewis Hamilton. I feel like we are gathered here today to mourn the career of Sir Lewis Hamilton. That was really bad from the chap yesterday. Let me play the devil's advocate in the first instance. He hasn't loved the car all season long. Acclimatising, brand new circumstance for Fiorano and Maranello as versus the boys and girls from Brackley and Bricks. A very different working culture, very different circumstance to adapt to. But yeah, and still, Sir Lewis is better than what we saw yesterday in qualifying. Did you see the mistakes that this fella was making? He was all over the shop. I mean, he was looking at his bloody steering wheel whilst hitting the apex of a turn. That's not the Sir Lewis Hamilton that we've all grown to know and love. I wouldn't expect that from a 7-time champion. Mount Rushmore of F1, first round Hall of Fame. What are you looking at the steering wheel, mate? And then all of a sudden you see the cone underneath Lewis Hamilton's car damage again. And then you come to find out that he had opportunity to cross the checkered flag and get another lap in, but he took his eye off the ball and there was confusion. He was asking the bloody pit bull, what's going on? Could I push? But by that time it was too late and Lewis Hamilton finds himself out of qualifying in Q1. What are we doing here, chat? Outrageous. And to that, David Coulthard says this, that despite the awful result, Lewis Hamilton, who better to bounce back than that fella? What is Sir Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton brilliant at? Picking himself back up and coming back. Of course, you are right, sir. I concur, sir. A dangerous Lewis Hamilton is a Lewis Hamilton with his back against the wall. Do you know what I mean? Never count that chap out. However, the headline in this instance is as follows. DC's first stanza, in which he says, quote, "It's embarrassing for Sir Lewis to be 20th. I know there was the yellow flag, but it's not a reflection of his true pace." And I concur, sir. It is embarrassing. You can't remember 2008 Sir Lewis and 2018 Sir Lewis and even correlate that person and driver then with what we're seeing now in this Scuderia Ferrari car. It's been bad, okay? So it was fortuitous circumstances or lack thereof. Of course it was. Like, I agree. I get it. There are some of those things that are outside of his control. And it was similar last weekend at the Brazil Grand Prix when Charles Leclerc spun right in front of his teammate. I get it. It's not going well over there at Fiorano and Maranello. The working circumstance and culture is far from ideal. Lewis Hamilton's told us that on a gazillion occasions. Allah, when he turned up at Canada circuit, the Gilles Villeneuve, and he looked at the way they were setting up the car and said, "This is nonsense. What are you doing? We've won a gazillion Grand Prix around here. This isn't the way to set up a car around this circuit. What are you doing?" I get it. But yeah, and still, Sir Lewis, if he is still Sir Lewis and isn't on the receiving end of some downside at the altar of Father Time, who is, by the way, undefeated, undisputed, pound for pound, never lost the round, needs to do better than that. There were too many mistakes. Why is his eye not on the apex? Why we're hitting bollards? Sir Lewis Hamilton, for Pete's sake, I remember, lest we forget, Leclerc to Aston Martin, the potential. We'll get to Leclerc, I'm telling you, it's going to get techie things. And then Federico Albano, who's written an article about Ferraris, or a tweet even, about all of Ferrari's travails, foibles and ineptitudes, during which he says the following. I'm going to read this out because this is important. Ferrari haven't had a car all year, but in the wet conditions, it's worse than usual. You would have heard Charles Leclerc fuming, swearing, colourful language. So frustrated is he now at the ineptitude, almost ad nauseum, of the team around him and their inability to build a car. Here's what Federico says. And again, remember, all F1 journos are created equally, but some are created more equal than others. Here's what Federico says. The Ferrari issue with the wet conditions today was clearly evident in its nature. From the mechanical suspension package, no energy reaches the tyres, and therefore in the wet they don't warm up and it becomes a disaster. Hang on 1 second, sir. Isn't that exactly what Loic Serra was brought on to do? Ensure that the chassis and the car more broadly interacts in a way that is optimal with the tyres. I'm sure Loic Serra was brought on to do exactly that. But I digress. Federica continues, and like usual, however, today the full wets were used and Leclerc in Q1 and Q2 often found excellent performance in the first sector. Why? Because that's the only part of the track with lateral loads. The full wet tyre has a high tread block, and when loaded laterally, it deforms. From there comes a bit of heat, and Charles was able to exploit it very well. Then the long straights and few slow corners brought the tyres back to marble-like state. Okay, that's chaos, chat. What are we doing here? I just don't understand. Ferrari can't be this bad. It's Scuderia Ferrari. Enzo Ferrari will be turning in his grave. They've been so bad for so bloody long, and this might have ramifications going forward, particularly if you're talking about their drivers pairing, the alt of one modern day Jean-Lazy, Charles Leclerc. We'll come to talk about his future in the next couple of minutes, I promise. Oh, and by the way, sort out your car, Ferrari. In conclusion, what are we doing here? John Elkann talking all this gubbins, all the while not providing the best driver pairing on the grid with a car capable of winning championships. This is not rocket science. We're not solving for Fermat's last theorem here. This is basics. This is counting. Build yourself a fudging car, in the immortal words of the legend that is Christian Horner. Oh, and by the way, Lando Norris has come out and he said a couple of different things. We learn now, by dint of the guys and girls over at the Checkered Flag podcast, to be precise, the one they call Harry Benjamin says that Lando's done a couple of things, and that's why he looks like he's about to be crowned champion of the drivers' variety. In the first instance, you know that they've tinkered with the car, the suspension, tick. Talking about the suspension geometry, tick. Lando Norris in the first instance, H1 of 2.5, didn't have the requisite feedback coming through the steering wheel. Andrea Stella, Zach Brown and team Rob Marshall too have given him that tick. But what's more important is his mental state, mental well-being, because I've said, and you said, and James Allen and Nico Rosberg more pertinently have all said that Lando Norris, that this championship will be won and lost at the altar of Lando Norris's mind. When it was Lando Norris 1.0, he wasn't sleeping. He was worrying about what he was worrying about. That was the extent to which this dude's mental was distracted. However, we learn now that he's changed his team, that he has himself a new sports psychiatrist to whom he speaks about all of these troubles, the lack of sleep and focus. That's why you hear them taking the Delta information off the wheel, so they can be in the moment, present, flow state settings. And then all of a sudden you see that Lando Norris is capable of being clutch in the clutchiest of times. Oh, and by the way, Lando Norris has talked about the race proper, because it's going to get techie. Low grip, and so that means a couple of different things. One of the things that Lando's always struggled with is what? Graining of the fronts. And in the post-quali presser, he speaks to that. He said, quote, "I always struggle a lot with front graining. I'm definitely better now. I think I probably used to be the worst on the grid. I hate it. I hate understeer. I hate the front not working, those kind of things." And that's something that can happen a lot here as well, and has done in the past. Oh, the humanity then, Lando Norris. You better hope that you've, in addition to nailing pole, that you set yourself up, the car up, to mitigate and minimise for front graining. Otherwise, as far as Lando Norris is concerned, in a couple of hours for the race, Houston, we have a problem. This article continues, and it's God tier from the guys and girls over at the race, that potentially, if he struggles with front graining over the course of the race, round 22, Las Vegas, the Lando Norris will potentially be powerless to prevent an early Max Verstappen coronation on that occasion. So hang on, we're mixing and matching here. An early Max Verstappen overtaking to turn one, and therefore a cheeky 25 points. But Lando doesn't need to win. He just needs to defend. This is damage limitation settings if past his prologue. And if Lando Norris can leverage his now 200 level IQ, well, that you say that's a bit premature, Cameron. He's not the goatiest, but I mean, he hasn't made any mistakes for as near as makes no difference. 4 or 5 bloody Grand Prix. We said again a gazillion times that Lando Norris can't start. He's a start bottle job, and then he goes and nails the 800 and something meters turn into turn one at the Mexican Grand Prix. Lando Norris 2.0, some say, has entered the chat. This article over at the race continues. A common consequence of how low track temperatures are in Las Vegas is front graining, a type of wear irregularity that creates suboptimal rubber patterns and wrecks grip. And that was clearly weighing heavily on Lando Norris pre-weekend on Wednesday. Asked about the McLaren being historically tricky to drive and how Vegas multiplies that effect, Lando Norris said in the developing of 2025 McLaren certainly opened up that window of workability and drivability. But then Vegas, again, is just a whole different ball game in terms of load and low grip. I will always struggle with front graining, he said. He's a bit better now, but not best. Front graining is going to get tech. You know who else struggles with front graining, chat? The one that they call OJP. What is going on over there? I swear, I have a feeling. My intuition says that we need to have this conversation under the aegis of driver silly season. Let me ask you this question if we're playing hypothetical games. Why would Oscar Piastri stay? If in his own mind at least, as his friends are asserting, he believes that this is Lando Norris 2.0's team, that they will always prefer for him to win in perpetuity. Why then? I ask you this question, and it's a non-rhetorical one here. Why would Oscar Piastri stay? Why would he stay? If that's Lando Norris's team, why would you stay and not leave? Non-rhetorical question to which I do not know the answers. I think Mark Webber and co will be having conversations. If past his prologue, lest we forget Alpine tweet, I will not be driving at Alpine next year. That dude is a contractual sellsword, no a mercenary. He will go wherever he thinks he can maximise for his probability of winning races and therefore championships. So what's to say that he'll stay at McLaren now? Well, of course, they might have the quickest car next year, God tier aero. So too, they'll have the Mercedes engine. So of course, you've got to throw the McLaren hat into the arena if you're having the conversation about which of the cars will be quickest in 2026. But if you're Oscar Piastri, we've all been in those positions, right, where you work in a job and you just need to leave. Sometimes you've got to hand in your notice and you don't even have another job waiting for you. It is that toxic. It is that insidious, that impactful on one's own mental health. Now, I'm not saying that that's Oscar Piastri yet, but for me, I feel like that sand timer has turned around now on OJP. If indeed he could be, if isn't already one of the best drivers on the grid, surely deserves a team around which he can build. They stopped upgrading the car and now he needs help. Go on, EasyG. Let's talk about this because I was talking to Mahad of McLaren Fan TV, and again, infinitely go-tier an F1 mind than me, and much more connected to all things going on at McLaren. And his conjecture was this. His principal thesis as far as Oscar Piastri's season was this: why would you, lest you be naive, turn down an upgraded suspension? Okay, so at the time, Oscar Piastri didn't need it. They said to him that it wasn't an upgrade necessarily in absolute terms. But then you get around the low grip tracks and all of a sudden, Oscar Piastri, because of the ambitious anti-dive, anti-squat setup, can't feel the car underneath him. All the while, conversely, Lando Norris is doing one of these gangbusters, starts perfect. All of a sudden, he's clutching qualifying. He has the car underneath him because now the understeer has been mitigated and minimised for. Meanwhile, Oscar Piastri doesn't even know his name. Do you know what I mean? Who is that driver in car number 81? And what has he done with Oscar Jack Piastri? That's the conversation that we're having. Oscar Piastri's weakness is absolutely Airbus low grip tracks is now and has always been. Why? Well, Mark Hughes' speculation is something like this. Oscar Piastri as versus Lando is less overlappy as far as his brake and his throttle inputs. That he's 100% on the throttle, 0% on the brakes. And when he's on the brakes, he's 100% on the brake pedal, 0% on the accelerator. Doesn't necessarily leverage any trail braking, therefore. Whereas Lando, in stark contrast, much more overlappy, feathering the throttle, utilising both pedals, often concurrently with a view to manipulate the car in and on around the limits of adhesion, get the car turned in on the shorter corners, the low minimum speed, medium duration type ones. And that's why Lando Norris struggles less, not with graining per se, but dead at the rear, gets the front tyres up to temperature better and manages for the rear ones a little bit better as well. He's more slidey. He wades better, more comfortably in those very murky waters, named of course the limits of adhesion, and that's the difference between the two. And that's why all of a sudden you give Lando the new suspension geometry and minimise for the understeer and give him feedback that he needs through the steering, and then gangbusters. Houston, you have yourself a 2025 world champion. Oscar would rather go to Vietnamese F8 before Alpine. Yeah, it's a good decision, eh? He didn't need it against an uncomfortable Lando. That's the thing. He thought that he had Lando's card, but you've got to play. This is chess, not checkers, though, EasyG, right? You've got to be 4 or 5 moves ahead if you're playing F1 games. Surely if there's advantage in it, then get it. Maybe not advantage now, but again, you've got to be playing 4 or 5 moves ahead. This is Gary Kasparov level of automotive pugilism, or at least it should be. Well, Oscar Piastri will potentially learn from his mistakes. And then we remember that Oscar Piastri tweeted out, he was asked about this, by the way. You'd assume we went through it yesterday, that Oscar Piastri is reposting things like this. Bernie Eccleston said, of course, McLaren will want to favour the British driver, for there will be commercial value in that. Take a look at all the ads, the Hilton ones, the Air Wallix ones, the Ralph Lauren ones, the Monster Energy Drink ones. Who's front and centre in those ad campaigns? There is only one man. He has a name. His name is Lando Norris. Oscar is nowhere to be seen. Of course, Oscar has his own deals with Australian food outlets, etc., but not the big bucks ones, the Hiltons and the Ralph Laurens. They all want Lando by dint of the cheeky glint in his eye, the wink and the smile. The men want to be him. Women want to be with him. That's Lando Norris's play. And I don't hate it. I've got to be honest. But then that's why Australian fans of Oscar Piastri all around the world will be looking at this and doing one of these. How are you talking all this favouritism stuff or lack thereof, Zach Brown, that you'd rather lose the Drivers' Championship before you favour one of your drivers, and then you get the British Grand Prix, and then you get the Australian call off the team, stand down Oscar Piastri. The conditions are too leery. You've got Max Verstappen breathing behind your neck. Don't challenge him. But when it's Lando's time to challenge, where were those commands? They go missing, fade to blacklist. We forget the British Grand Prix, Monza, where they ask Oscar Piastri to tow Lando Norris into Q3. What do we do? Honestly, take easy. What they should have done was take the upgrade, and if it didn't work, then take it. 100% easy, G. I think he was being too braggadocious. At the time, I thought it was admirable from Oscar Piastri, but I think that ultimately is the tale of his season in 2025. Oscar is a thinking man's driver, Miami, but then take the bloody suspension, geometry, setup, minimise for the understeer. Even if it's not a problem now, who's to say when you get to low grip, the tracks around which you've always struggled, mention no names, Las Vegas, Abu Dhabi, Brazil, Mexico, who's to say that it won't help you then? I don't know. Cameron, note this comment. Leclerc and Max's teammates, Aston Martin 27. Perez, let's talk about it then, mate. You segued very nicely, and I don't want to be one. I'm not one really to bury the lead. Right, let me tell you before we talk about Charles Leclerc, Toto the boy who cried wolf had a discussion with himself on answers.com, GQ I think, and he was asked the question, which one of the drivers on the current grid are the most underrated? And he responded, he gave the exam answer as you would anticipate, and I think there's something to be said for King George Russell. Of course, he's the most underrated. People confusing the F1 community dislike with incompetence. They are two separate entities, and never the twain shall meet. To hate somebody is very different from them being a bad driver. You can love or loathe King George Russell of Kings Lynn Norfolk. That's up to you. That is in your gift. But to say that he's not one of the drivers of the year by dint of his god-tier performances in a car not usually capable of winning races and therefore championships, that's the mark of a champion, eh? When that dude gets a car next year, potentially, I think everybody's going to be taken back. Now, Lewis Hamilton fans don't like him because they expected him to come into Mercedes and wipe Lewis's bottom for him. But they misunderstood who King George Russell is. He's come for himself. He's only here to win races and championship. Don't believe me? Ask Aitken about the manoeuvre that George Russell pulled on him. He's only a couple steps away. If we're talking ruthlessness, if we're talking resilience and determination, commitment to the cause, lifestyle choices, you only have to listen to Nico Rosberg talk about George Russell running around with his pillow et al. With a view to make sure that he optimises for the all-important sleep before a race weekend. That's who George Russell is. There is no lengths at which this dude will not go to in order to get himself a couple milliseconds of advantage. Reminds me a lot of Nico Rosberg, and I think Nico Rosberg said the same thing too. Oh, and by the way, peak Charles Leclerc settings. Listen, let me say this for the avoidance of doubt. It's techier than techie things, this. I tell you this. It's all going off in driver's silly season. Now, a lot of this is bubbling beneath the surface. Mention no names. Max to Mercedes in 2027. Mention no names. Oscar Piastri to an unknown destination. Or at the very least, conversations are being had in the background with the likes of Red Bull and Aston Martin potentially. And maybe even Mercedes. Who knows? But again, some will say that this is just F1. Standard fare. You're not breaking any news here, Cameron. Well, in and amongst all of that driver's silly season buffoonery, you've got to throw Charles Leclerc's name in there. Why? Well, because he's vexed, he's fuming, he's had it up to here, and as well he might. Everybody rates Charles Leclerc after Maximilian Verstappen, about who many people say he is worth anywhere between 2 and 3 tenths on the rest of the field when he's had his Weetabix. The next person they talk about as far as building an empire around is Charles Leclerc, aka modern day Jean Alesi. Now, does he have his weak spots? Is he prone to making a cheeky error of the unforced variety? You bet your bottom dollar he is. But is he quickest point to point? Many F1 aficionados have been saying this for a gazillion years, that when Charles Leclerc, aka modern day Jean Alesi, has had his Weetabix, then there's not a quicker driver, not on the grid today, nor ever in history. And that's worthy of note, particularly going into a brand new rule and reg set. If you want to optimize for your driver pairing as, I don't know, Lawrence Stroll, again, another dude who will stop at nothing if indeed there is durable competitive advantage to be gained, which is why Charles Leclerc needs to go on an Airbus. We'll get into it, mate. I'm telling you, Ferrari has too much ego to listen to Lewis. Zumac, you've raised this point. Go on, as we parlay into Charles, because Charles, I think, has been brilliant season to date. 66 points down the road is he now from Sir Lewis, Carl, Davidson, Hamilton, and that's worthy of note. Lewis Hamilton's typing all these memos and organising all these meetings with a view to talk about continuous improvement going in to 2026. But the engineers are looking at Sir Lewis like, yeah, hang on. What have you done for me lately, Sir Lewis? Yeah, you're a 7-time champion in a god-tier market-leading car, W11. They'll say anybody, Valtteri Bottas, but for you being in another car, Lewis, could have won that championship then. What have you done for me lately? Oldest truism in F1 history. And if you're not winning races, then what are you telling me about do my job for? That's what they'll be saying over at Ferrari. And that's why it's getting techier than techie things. Of course, they should be listening to Lewis Hamilton because he knows exactly what good looks like. Who of the drivers on the grid currently is more familiar with market leading agile practices at an F1 team than Sir Lewis, Carl, Davidson, Hamilton? But if there is pride and stubbornness, as there tends to be, as there always has been at Fiorano and Maranello, then of course they'll be looking at Lewis like, hang on, you're telling me how to do my job. Do your own job, Sir Lewis. All these mistakes and errors of the unforced variety, who is that in car 44 and what has he done with Sir Lewis Hamilton? That's what they'll be saying. About Charles Leclerc, however, they might not want to take his advice, but when he nails it, when he's 66 points down the road from Sir Lewis, Carl, Davidson, Hamilton, when he's been patient ad infinitum, when he does his best to work with the drivers, when he's not quite the marketing behemoth that Sir Lewis is, but nearly, when he's building brands and products, surely they've got to listen to Charles Leclerc when he starts fuming over the radio. And he has been fuming over the radio. They've not given him what he deserves, what his talents deserve even. Here's what's been going on. And this is where it gets techier than techie things. In the first instance, this is what Charles Leclerc said of qualifying. P9 is where Charles Leclerc put that. Is that where he deserves? Again, you can see him wrestling the car, doing one of these. Remember, in F1, smooth is fast. So when I see what I'm expected to think when I see point to point, who some say is the quickest on the grid, hacksawing at the steering wheel, what is that about? If not for the car's ineptitudes, multitudinous foibles of the aerodynamic and mechanical variety. This isn't good. Charles Leclerc said, what's going on here? This is nonsense. My God, this is embarrassing, effing hell. I don't get how we can be so far off the pace. There's like zero grip, zero effing grip. Charles Leclerc talking with a colourful language. And you know what? There's only so much tone and intonation. There's only so much feeling and sentiment that you can get from reading words on a page. So have a listen to Charles Leclerc repeating these words back in the car in real time. Roll the clip.
My God, embarrassing. Fucking embarrassing. Fuck now. I don't get how we can be so off the pace. There's like zero grief. Zero fucking grief.
Insane. Absolutely insane. You feel it for Charles Leclerc. The frustration now is loud, almost tangible. What has he done to deserve that? Charles Leclerc, you can see his body language getting out of the car. Is that enough? This is nonsense. 7 years of his prime in Formula One, where time is a finite resource. Charles Leclerc's given away to that red team with the yellow badge and the black prancing Corsa top. Enzo Ferrari would be ashamed to have a Charles Leclerc in that car, and not yet over the course of 7 years have they given that dude a car commensurate, worthy of his not insubstantial driving talents. Of course he's going to be fuming. I would contend there is more risk to Charles Leclerc's career of him staying than of him leaving at this juncture. Now, I always say disparagingly about Charles that he's a modern day Jean Lazy. There is a risk that he will become that if he chooses to stay at that team and they keep not delivering. How many roads can a man walk down before you got to call him a fool? Fool me once, Charles Leclerc, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And at this time, at this juncture, Scuderia Ferrari have fooled him 3 and 4 and 5 times. I remember 2022 briefly, Q1, Q2, where Ferrari had given him a car, and then FIA introduced TD0035, and then all of a sudden that Ferrari's pace went missing. So why would you not, Games, you're a legend, why would you not then, if you were Charles Leclerc, be exploring your opportunities as soon potentially as 2027? Let's have a look at this. You remember a couple of weeks ago we saw this. Now this is nothing in and of itself, but then you zoom in, and again this could be Photoshop. Sometimes you've got to look at these things with a discerning eye now. Then you zoom in and you see that label. That's the label. That looks a lot like the logo of Lawrence Stroll's private boat. What does this mean then? Maybe it's just coincidence. Maybe we're doing the F1 epiphany and connecting causation dots that shouldn't be connected. Or maybe that's one of Lawrence Stroll's steeds ushering one Charles Leclerc onto Lawrence Stroll's boat with a view to have a contractual conversation. Now, some of you will say, the skeptics amongst you will say that, listen, this always happened. This is driver's silly season. Of course, Charles Leclerc's going to have a cheeky catch-up with Lawrence Stroll with a view to understand what his number could be if he was to join the green team with Adrian Newey and Andy Cowell as soon as 2027. But I think this is DEFCON 1 now. I think Charles Leclerc has to be exploring his opportunities, because what else is he going to do? Like stay at Ferrari? No, this is absolute nonsense and gubbins. And then you see this news article, and this is where it gets techie things. Remember, for the avoidance of doubt, with a discerning eye amongst purveying all Charles Leclerc circumstances, that not all F1 journalistic publications are created equal, but some are created more equal than others. Leo Torini has written the following about Charles Leclerc, that it is known that he has a concrete offer, a crystallised one, from Aston Martin to drive for them for 2027. Oh, the humanity. It isn't the only offer that Charles Leclerc has. Mention no names. Mercedes, if we're speculating. Mention no names. Red Bull, and potentially mention no names. McLaren. Oh, the humanity. It's also known he has been waiting since 2019 for a winning Ferrari. You bet your bottom dollar he has. And this article continues. It gets a bit techie because listen, this is a formal offer. Now, we know a couple of months ago even, there's a formal offer on the table for Maximilian Verstappen right around the summer break when people speculated that he could null and void his contract because of performance clauses and stipulations. However, this feels a little bit different now. Charles Leclerc's had enough. Article over F1 Oversteer, the legends over there, continues as follows. Charles Leclerc's manager Nicolas Todd has said that Charles Leclerc needs a winning car, a message that will be eagerly received by interested parties. You know why the timing of that is key, that the irony here isn't lost on me. It was only the other day when John Elkann was saying that, you know what, team unity is key, but to form that, to facilitate that, we need ourselves drivers who talk less and drive more. Drivers, plural. How very dare you, John Elkann, talk about Lewis and now Charles under that Egypt. How very dare you. Of course Charles Leclerc will be hearing that and he'll be like, what are you doing? I've done nothing but be patient with you. Now I'm going to start effing and bloody. You want me to talk? You think that I talk too much? I don't think I talk enough. Charles Leclerc will be thinking, have some of this colourful language in the car. The car isn't numpty. I'm on P9 and I'm probably one of the quickest, if not the quickest point to point. So what are you talking about, John Elkann? Talk less, drive more. I've been driving this SH1T box around here for 7 years, wasting away the prime years of my F1 career. What are you talking about, John Elkann? This is nonsense. This is F1 baloney. Go away, sir. What are you talking? No chance. No chance. If I were Charles Leclerc, I would try and null and void my contract with immediate effect. Get out of there. Not even appreciated. You know when you shut your mouth and you hold corn, you do nothing but hold corn. And then your bloody boss comes out and says you need to do X, Y, and Z. Why don't you build a car, John Elkann? And why don't you hire the people? If these lot can't build it, why don't you hire the people that can? 7 years Charles Leclerc's been sat there with his career wasting away. He's got muggles like Cameron calling him modern day Jean lazy, when some would say he's anything but that, much quicker, much more capable of an F1 peddler. How very dare Cameron CC. But sadly for Charles, the differential is converging. You know when they say never argue with fools because from a distance it's hard to tell who is who. That's where Charles Leclerc is now as far as the comparison between him and modern day, being a modern day Jean lazy. Squint your eyes and you can barely tell the difference, and there's the problem, because it shouldn't be that for Charles Leclerc. He should already be, if we're talking about ability, he should already be a multiple time champion. Who can wrestle with Max Verstappen better than Charles Leclerc? That tells you how good that dude is. You remember at Silverstone, Charles Leclerc is an absolute champion in waiting. The only thing is, Ferrari aren't going to build him the car. F1 Oversteer continues. As he approaches 150 race starts for the team, he will hit that benchmark at the season-ending Grand Prix Abu Dhabi. His win tally still stands at 8. 150 Grand Prix for Charles Leclerc, 8 race wins. Not good enough, and you can't lay blame nor culpability at only his thought. Of course we have to have the conversation under the aegis of the car being not fit for purpose. This is not fair. Full stop. New paragraph. He hasn't had the opportunity to increase it this season, though he has scored 7 podiums. Aston Martin on the back of this, seeing that Charles Leclerc is now discontent with this ineptitude, this underperformance at the altar of Scuderia Ferrari almost in perpetuity, Aston Martin have formalised a Charles Leclerc approach. They have set to pique his interest, flirt with him with a proper offer. Italian journalist Leo Turini recently revealed that Aston Martin have repeatedly contacted Charles Leclerc about joining the team in 2027. This reflects Lawrence Stroll's immense ambition. In the print edition of the Sportivo Quotidiano, excuse the Italian, do you know what I mean? It's techie. Turini now says it is known that Leclerc has had an offer from the Silverstone outfit. Intriguingly, this isn't the only offer that Charles Leclerc has received. The article continues. Though his current contract lasts to the end of 2029, Charles Leclerc reportedly negotiated an exit clause for 2026. Oh, the humanity. There's your bombshell. That's where it gets techier than techie things. Everybody's got the exit clause going into 26. This would allow him to assess how Ferrari are or not competing well against their rivals, how they're performing under the new regulations. Aston Martin had previously been strongly linked with Maximilian Verstappen, but it appears their focus may now be shifting to Charles Leclerc, given the fact that it looks like Toto, the boy who cried wolf, has got first dibs of Max Verstappen PLC. Oh, the humanity, chat. Listen, I don't hate it. It's driver silly season and I'm here for it. Of course Charles Leclerc has to leave. Let me know what you guys think in it. Of course he has to leave. Why would he stay? Chat, no chance. Have 100% faith that Adrian will build the best chassis. Whether the Honda PU will be up to it is the only question. I'm hearing good things there, but about the Honda power unit. I'm not going to lie to you. And again, this is all F1 speculation and rumour, depending on how invested you wish to be in word on the F1 curve. But I'm hearing good things. Maybe it'll take them a couple of years, but Adrian, you will come out the gate quick. Is there any bigger guarantee of success as far as aerodynamicists, performance and race engineers than the last airbender, the one that they call Adrian Newey? Dominance in previous years is way bigger. EasyG says 20% of all winning F1 cars were designed by Adrian Newey. Ergo, ipso facto, great minds think alike. He has to leave, but he can't. Toxic marriage. I don't think he wants to, John. You make the point about Charles. He said on a gazillion occasions that winning a championship with Ferrari is more important to him than winning a championship full stop. And that's valiant. That's noble. It's chivalry. Do you know what I mean? Enzo Ferrari will be smiling hearing Charles Leclerc say that, but he can't sacrifice his career for that. He can't just go ad infinitum. There is only so much patience one can have. He's wasting away his career. Imagine he'd signed for Red Bull and been going head to head with Max Verstappen all these years and Lewis Hamilton. I mean, it would be something. It would be something. I like to see that, says Easy. Missile Rest. I was thinking the same thing. Lord Junior stays. Do you think, okay, so go on then. I think Lawrence isn't going to sack his son. Listen, the story goes something like this again. If word on the F1 curb is something in which you can be invested, that Lawrence Stroll, as recently as a couple of years ago, wanted to put his pen down, hang up his Nomex, call time on his underperforming F1 career, and Lawrence Stroll, Papa Stroll, said, are you crazy, mate? I bought this team. I've invested £150 million worth of capital into a brand new factory at Aston Martin, 50 million into the wind tunnel, restructuring in real time the car manufacturer Aston Martin Lagonda, all at the altar of optimizing for your Lance Stroll probability of winning a championship, and you're going to hang this up, mate? No, you're not. No. What makes you think that this is determinism and free will? Get yourself back in the sim, son. What are you talking about? Lance Stroll desperately wanted to sack it off. He's not looked happy for you. He doesn't want to be there, does Lance? But Lawrence Stroll is living out his dreams vicariously through his sons. You've been a driver for 10 plus years without a chip. You need to pack it in. Pricky, that's too harsh, isn't it? Some drivers just don't get... You need yourself a car. And I'd argue that Charles Leclerc hasn't had one. Can you imagine this Charles Leclerc in the Mercedes alongside Sir Lewis in 2018, or in the Red Bull alongside Max Verstappen 2022 through 2024? Oh, the humanity would be chaos. Isn't me saying that the results would ultimately have changed, but I feel like Charles Leclerc's not insubstantial talents behind the wheel of an F1 car deserve such wheels, such automotive materials. Lando will be hitting European average of 63 for his chaos. Darius, it's scary though. I'll tap out of F1 if he'd be a championship contender. Lance, I think it'd be a good news story. You know, I was watching Lando in the post Quali interview. I can't hate him as much as it would be a paradigm shift to see them take the number one off of my guy Max Verstappen, GOAT, and put it on Lando Norris's car. I mean, I'm allergic to that as a vision. Don't get it to it. I'm not going to lie here. I can't. Truth, value, objectivity be damned at this juncture. I won't like it. It won't sit well with me. But I mean, if he's done it, could you argue with a straight face, with tongue not in cheek, that Lando Norris, how he's conducted himself and behaved on track over the past 4 or 5 races, Could you argue with a straight face in good faith that Lando Norris didn't deserve it? Of course, he's the beneficiary of McLaren and prodigal son and length and breadth of service and tenure. Of course, he's had a god tier MCL 3.9, and if that were Max Verstappen in the car, then Max would be 1,100 points down the road in the driver's studies. Of course, so there is fast car privilege bait into there, but when has there not been fast car privilege baked into the drivers' championship story? So I say that to say this: could you argue with a straight face that Lando Norris, especially over the past 4 or 5 Grand Prix, by dint of the way he's behaved in the clutch times, championship rounds, Q3 Mexico as an example, Q3 in Brazil, start Brazil, race restart in Brazil, snaking like a Max Verstappen, could you argue with a straight face that Lando Norris, with objectivity front and centre, that Lando doesn't deserve the championship? Open question, non-rhetorical one. Red Bull will be dead last, you heard it first. Next year, John. Well, Lauren Meckers has told us that the Red Bull Ford collaboration, that it's not the most likely outcome, that they're quicker than Scuderia, Ferrari and Mercedes. More legacy, more expertise. 2014 split turbo hybrid settings, lest we forget. Exactly, having the fastest car is part of winning championship. A prerequisite, some would say, EasyG. Not taking number 1 is an insult, in my humble opinion. I think you'll take it. Everybody's changing their numbers anyway, John, aren't they? Lewis Hamilton saying he's going to switch around the number 44. I don't like that. What have happened to superstition? Didn't drivers, I want to say back in the day, and again, don't quote me on this, don't take this one to the bank, but I feel like most of the drivers on the grid back in the day, there was a superstition about changing their number and helmet. Do you know what I mean? But again, a different time, right? A time where danger and risk was always front row. VIP paddock passes, now less so these days. Like, still present is danger and risk. But box seats, do you know what I mean? In the rafters, not front row anymore. Such a good job have the FIA done with the halo, etc. Lance Stroll for WDC. Behave yourself, Miss RS. You can't even write. It's an oxymoron there. A contradiction in terms. Lance Stroll, drivers champion. Does that even? You can't even fit those two phrases in the same sentence. Yeah, I feel like you're bending the space-time continuum there, Miss RS. People forget it's a development race, 100%. And McLaren have done well, EasyG. This is the truth. And Lando's been all right, man. Like, I can't... Do I love Lando Norris? Probably not. I've got to come before you and eat some humble pie and hold some corn, EasyG. Like, he's been all... Listen, I didn't think Lando Norris was going to start to make starts well, to unshackle himself from the start bottle job prison. I didn't think I'd see Lando Norris leveraging Max Verstappen's tactics off the safety car. Wasn't it only a couple of races when he got his lunch money stolen at Baku off the safety car restart because he was fiddling around with brake bias? Whatever happened to that Lando Norris 1.0, aka Dustin from Stranger Things? He might be the same man, like aesthetically at face value. When you see him in the car and the way that he's moving, the starts are just like, what? Go on then, let's test this. Let's see in a couple of hours how he moves off the start going into turn 1. Because Max will test him. Don't get it twisted. Max with nothing to lose. He'll go for it. F-boy, you're a legend. I hear you, man. It's okay for you not to like him. EasyG, I don't warm to him. I don't know. There's something about Lando. There is an air of nepotism and privilege, but I can't hate him. Max has changed it. Max has indeed changed, mate. Max has shown me things that I never thought I would see, particularly in 2021. Lando has made the click for him. So yeah, he's done all right, hasn't he, Safak? I've got a. This is me confessing for my sins, a repentance of sorts. He's been all right as Lando Norris. I have to change my tune for me to still bang the Lando Norris start bottle job drum. Would be disingenuous. It's not been too bad, and it feels and looks like prediction for the race. Lando for the win. I mean, the prediction for the race is a synonym of your prediction for turn 1, right? Can I see past Lando? Here's what I will say about Lando Norris. I don't think off the back of FP3 when he did that bonkers sector 2 time. Do you remember we jotted it down? I just thought that was a massive warning shot. There was a signal of intent, a red flag. The fact that Lando, Freudian slip, was able to, in FP3, do a sector 2 of 31.829, with at the very least 10 minutes left on the docket. I thought that was foreboding. I thought that portended some serious speed in that MCL39, particularly in the hands of Lando and Norris. 31.829 FP3. It was like 6/10 down the road as far as just sector 2 in isolation. 6/10 down the road from everyone else, and it stood true, didn't it? Because in Q3 it was a similar story, and that listen, I think there's extra pace. Lest we forget, even on that lap, it wasn't a perfect lap through sector 3, but that McLaren in Lando's hands through sector 2 in particular, that the natural habitat of the MCL39 being medium speed, medium duration turns. I don't know. I think he'll be tough to beat. Even if Max gets ahead of him, he's going to have to be his god-tieriest self to keep Lando behind him, particularly when you're thinking about pit stops. Do says Red. do Cameron's the best. Wish you were day testing a Grand Prix vehicle of your. Let's go, Edgar. I wouldn't hate that. I absolutely wouldn't hate that. But again, I'm probably too old and grey in the first instance, and probably the eyes are going, Edgar. The reflexes aren't what they were. Do you know what I mean? The heel and toe doesn't. I know it's that doesn't play even in an F1 car. But the heel and toe and the double clutching isn't what it used to be. Sainz is starting next to Max, but Max at Mercedes, yes, George would fight. I think that's where we're headed, Darius. I think Mr. Anderson, that train is never late at this point as far as Max and Mercedes. You know already. I just don't think. Why would Toto have Max on his yacht for what? Just to talk about the weather, mate. I feel like that's on the proviso that Mercedes build themselves a god tier car in 2.6. What do you think? What do you think Max is going to do? What, just be loyal to Red Bull ad nauseum? No. Tilioro, I wish I was still done. No, it's not happening. Sainz has many accidents lately. I tell you what Sainz is good at doing. You heard Mark Slade on the Peter D. Windsor podcast, where Mark Slade was talking about, I want to say it was Mexico Turn 2, that Carlos Sainz has this weird trick, the way he's able to hook the inner right wheel into the curb and like use the curb to almost accentuate the turning. I think Carlos Sainz is a curb merchant. He's a street sweeper, isn't he? A lady of the night. No, I mean, seriously, but there is something around here. When you've got these tracks where there's curbs, Carlos Sainz's feel and the way his ability to ride curbs and leverage the curbs with a view to accentuate the turning on the low speed, medium duration turns where there is a curb, I think is different. I love him. He addressed it. I saw what you did there. They were just in the same place, Cameron, and they were saving money. No point in spending more on tea. Can you imagine, Darius? Listen, it's going to get tricky. Can you explain the other ways to get the job done that Lando has showed, to understand your context and not having to fill in the gaps with my own interpretation? It's a good question. So you're asking askew. Is that about Lando as we round third? Curb Matador, let's go. Game and music, do you mind if I borrow that? DNF, Max and Lando. Why? Oh, Gary, are you rooting for your boy OJ? OJ, but come on, Oscar. He's got to be. I feel like all hope is gone from his eyes, though. Like he looks like a beaten man, if there is even such a thing. He just looks devoid of all hope and optimism. I feel like a combination of things has sucked the life out of Oscar Piastri. Of course, I was arguing back and forth with Bakti and Shez about this. Of course, there's a couple bad performances for which Oscar Piastri will need to hold some corn and have a word with himself in the accountability mirror. Of course, Oscar Piastri isn't blameless. He can't absolve himself completely of responsibility. But in and around that causation pie, you've got to have the conversation about favouritism, perceived or otherwise. Maybe it's not real. Maybe it's fugazi. Maybe I'm putting on my tinfoil hat again. Maybe. But if there is a downstream effect, impact even on Oscar Piastri driving, then it's realer than real can get, isn't it? Doesn't matter whether it's fugazi. If Oscar Piastri perceives it to be real, that there is favouritism, that Lando Norris is the McLaren prodigal son, that he's a business affiliate, or at least was once a business affiliate of CEO Zak Brown, then it seeps into you here, right, and eats you in a story told in tense, where milliseconds can decide championships. Of course, it's going to have a downstream impact on Oscar, and he's admitted as much. And he said after Monza that he was fuming that Monza leads to Singapore, and you know what I mean, which leads in turn to Baku, and all these things are wrapped up. It's hard to delineate and start pulling threads as far as causation is concerned, but I think there is an interdependency there. I don't know, so if Lando was fat, he's quick. He's quick. So go on then, prediction time as you round fourth. Listen, you can't back against Max, can you? Ever. But you want me to tell you a story? I transferred, you guys know already that I've lost money at the altar of backing against Max Verstappen season today. When I had a conversation before qualifying with Mr. Wins, I said, surely Max is going to do right. New engine, Red Bull around Las Vegas, cooler climbs, takes away all of the advantages of McLaren. Of course, surely Max is going to nail this. And Mr. Windsor, in his usual oracle voice, said, Max is struggling. I don't think he has the car underneath him. I think Lando's the guy around there, and then true to form. So I was like, maybe I get myself a couple of quid on Lando Norris. So 4-1, by the way, 4-1. This is not financial recommendation nor advice. 4-1 though, meaning that Lando only puts it on pole 20% of the time. Now, of course, hindsight's always 20/20, but 4-1. I saw that in real time when we were streaming Quali. I was like, this is a lie, isn't it? The odds makers don't watch F1. And your boy transferred a couple quid with a view to place the bet. And then I just like, no, Max Verstappen tax put me off. I've already lost money on Lando Norris. I can't trust him. But Lando over the last 5 races is a very different proposition as versus Lando over the first 15 or 16. Max will summon Franz Hermann, NLS. Darius says, Oscar not only needs to learn from this, but he needs to learn to say F you to the team. So 100%, mate. You should have said that a couple of times, right? Margaret, say it as it is. Go on and chat. We'll be back in a couple of hours. It is, go on, let me work it out. 3:30 a.m. We go live for the race proper. Yes, degenerate. You proper betting degenerate. John, can't help myself. It's in my blood. It completes me. Right, we go live in 6 hours time, T-minus 6.5 hours, and we go live 30 minutes before lights out. We'll get the race stream going again. It's 4 a.m. lights out UK time, and it will get techier than techie things. Between now and then, you guys have been legends as always. I appreciate you guys to the moon and back, and I make no apology for stating that between now and next time, the prosecution rests no further questions, Your Honour.